Our next unit of study is Chapter 2, Features of Life in the Cell. In this unit, we will be talking about the building blocks of life, the cell, and the many things that make us living and keep us together. Take a second to think about the characteristics of things that are alive. Please write this down in your notes. How we define living things are using 8 different characteristics. Characteristic number 1 is that living things are made of cells. Cells are the building blocks of life, and if you are a living thing, you are made of one or more cells. Living things also use energy. Energy is what keeps us moving and keeps us going. If something is living, it must at one point or another use energy. Because they use energy, living things also need some sort of food. In this instance, we have producers, which produce their own food, and consumers, which get their food by eating or obtaining consumers. Living things also develop. They could get bigger. They could have different systems of their body develop, but in one way or another, they will change over time. If something is living, it must also reproduce. If reproduction did not take place, it's easy to say that we might not be here today, nor would any other living thing. Trees, plants, and other animals all reproduce. Similarly, living things grow. Think of yourself and what you might have looked like as a young person. Think of what you look like now, and try to picture what you might be as you are older. You have grown. Plants, animals, viruses, bacteria, all living things will grow. Living things also adapt. In adapting, they change to meet their conditions or the conditions of their environment. Your environment is the area that surrounds you and all of the outside stimuli. Living things also respond. Think of what happens when someone has a cut. Think what happens. You probably first bleed, then you might have a scab form, and potentially even a scar. You have responded to an outside source. We are part of the earth, and the earth utilizes chemistry. Living things are made up and organized in many things. We are living, plants are living, other animals are living. We fall under the category of living things. We are made up of matter. Matter is anything that has mass. We are matter, and we can be broken into smaller parts of matter. That matter is made up of atoms and molecules. For the most part, we are made up of a great deal of oxygen. That being said, the next most prevalent atom in our system is carbon. Following that is hydrogen, and eventually we run into things like nitrogen, calcium, phosphorus, and others. We are not purely those substances, we are made of molecules of those substances. A long time back, a guy by the name of Robert Hooke took a look at cork in a microscope. This was when the microscope was new. He noticed that there was lots of places of empty space in that piece of cork. He called them cells. At this time, these were not the cells that we think of. They were dead cells of cork. Eventually, scientists looked more in depth at these cells and realized that these cells had a nucleus. There are 3 parts to cell theory, and they go as such. All living things are made of cells. You, I, the bacteria, funguses, animals, and plants, anything that is living is made of cells. Cells are the basic units of living things. Just like atoms are the basis of molecules, which are the basis of matter, cells are the basis of tissues and other organs, which are the basis for you and me. Cells also come from other cells. cells divide and reproduce. Please pause and watch the cell theory video on Moodle. There are many parts to a cell. Some we will go in more detail of than others, but these parts all have special functions and serve different purposes. The cell membrane, or the area around the outside of the cell, helps to give the cell its shape and holds the cytoplasm and other parts of the cell in place. The nucleus of the cell is the part that controls the cell's activities. It is central to many of the cell's functions. The nuclear membrane, or the area around the outside of the nucleus, is a structure that surrounds the nucleus and separates it from the rest of the cell. Inside the nucleus, we find what is called the nucleolus that helps make ribosomes, which we'll talk about later on. The cytoplasm inside the cell is a jelly-like substance that makes up most of the cell. Most of the cell's chemical reactions take place in the cytoplasm. We also have in the nucleus, we have chromosomes. Now we'll talk about chromosomes later on, but as you know, that's what helps makes us who we are. There are also parts in the cell called ribosomes. Ribosomes are cell parts where proteins are made. Here's a ribosome, as you can see here in this animal cell. If we look at a plant cell, we would see a chloroplast. If we saw a chloroplast, we would see that this is where chlorophyll is made, and this is the most important part of a plant. Most cells have vacuoles within the cytoplasm. A vacuole is a liquid-filled space that contains food, water, and minerals. A structure found in animal cells, but not plant cells, is a centriole. It's a part that helps with cell reproduction. You can see that part right here. Plant cells have what's called a cell wall, which we will look at when we flip to the next page to look at the plant cell. One of the most important parts of the cell is the mighty mitochondria. The mitochondria can be seen here in this cell, and this is where energy is produced that's from food that has been digested. This is the energy system for the cell. As you can see, cells are quite intricate pieces made with smaller, more specialized pieces. If we look at a plant cell, we can see that they have a cell wall. Many parts are similar in the cell, but we can also see the cell wall. If we look further on, we can see the chloroplast, where chlorophyll is stored and photosynthesis takes place. Please pause and watch the cell parts video, which can be seen on Moodle. What are some similarities that you saw between plant and animal cells? What are some of the differences that you saw between plant and animal cells? Please list these in your notes. There are two processes that are critical to cell production. One is diffusion, which is where different small particles move in and out of the cell from an area of high concentration to a low concentration. Osmosis is quite similar to diffusion, but it specializes in the movement of water from areas of high concentration to low concentration across a cell wall or cell membrane. You will see later on in our visuals what diffusion and osmosis look like. Living things are organized in a very systematic way. As you can see here, cells are the smallest parts of all matter. They make up all of our tissues, all of our many parts, and the same is true in all organisms. From there, cells that are similar combine to form tissues. These are where similar cells that have same functions or the same jobs combine. A piece of skin tissue or a piece of brain tissue could be seen where cells are very similar. An organ is a group of tissues that works together to do a special job. Take a second to write down a couple of organs. An organ system is a group of organs that work together to perform a special function. They have a special job. You have many sets of organ systems that we'll talk about later on that serve special purposes. Take a second to write down an organ system. Finally, when you put this all together, you get a full organism, a living thing, a tree, a plant, an animal, a person, an organism. Smallest to largest, we have cells that form tissues, tissues that come together to form organs, organs that combine to form organ systems, and organ systems that help make up an organism. Please pause and watch the Organization of Organisms video. After you have done so and completed the notes, you have finished this section of our notes.